Welcome everyone to the fourth Balkan Film Week. And I would like to say hello to everyone online and especially also to the people at the Ute Konowitz, because finally we can do analog events again. So we're super happy to be at the Ute Konowitz as well. A big thank you to the Ute Konowitz for having us, because it is always an amazing pleasure to be with you. So as I said, this is now the fourth Balkan Film Week, and as per usual, it is a sort of appetizer for our literary events, which will happen in mid-March. So to introduce the program, I would like to welcome the program curator, Marija Katalinić. Hello, Marija.
Hello, hi, Barbara, and hi, everybody.
So this year's theme for the Common Ground is us and them. And in your expose about the Balkan Film Week, you actually wrote something very nice. And that is that the term us and them, many times, especially by politicians, is then coined in a different, more nefarious way as us or them. And I really like that. But tell us just a little bit more how you feel about this year's theme and how you selected the 7 films that we will be able to watch over the next 3 days.
Well, thank you very much for the compliment. It really is something. So, you know, coming from a context where us or them implies a sort of negative, not sort of, but implies a negative connotation, a violent sort of behavior towards something that is other. You know, this year, together with the Stiftung, we thought about and wanted to show how it's, you know, as I said in a previous year, like and. So us, it's not us or them, it's us and them. And there's a beauty in this diversity that the joint implication of us and them implies. So, you know, as I wrote in the expose with categories such as age, gender, sex, space and locality, where all these different identities coexist, do not necessarily imply something that's oppressed or opposite, but they, coexist together. And what the films this year try to show is this different levels of us and them together. So it's not based on nationalism so much. It's not based on something that is, let's say, rooted in this kind of stereotype, generalized negative image of the Balkan Peninsula or the post-Yugoslav space, but it's more on all these identities that happen together and the diversities between those identities, but that come together in the same kind of pot.
Talking about, when you said now nationalities and maybe even ethnicities, actually on day 2 this time, there are actually 2 films. There's Gudacz's The Wire and Popivoda's Landscapes of Resistance. And I guess these 2 films are the closest to what we talked about last year, Archipelago Yugoslavia. So maybe you want to give us a bit more info on these 2 films and how they perhaps connect to the theme and also to each other.
Right. So as you said, absolutely. The idea is not necessarily of this year to show, the opposite, the borders, the separation. However, I felt, so these are all mostly films that are very contemporary, have, received an amazing awards for the stories they showcase. And that's one of the reasons they were selected. But it's also because they kind of, are a sense of warning to what can happen if we start to look at the other or diversity in a negative aspect, something that you said, we were looking at last year. So these 2 films talk about the privilege of migration and the notion of personal histories that then, come in the collective history. And as I said, both are warnings to the situation that comes when we, and I say we as nations, as people, as individuals, act through fear against, against those who are seen as different, that oppose the mainstream, let's say, state politics. So these films testify the oppressed lives who became, as a consequence on the other side of what we consider, them. So Landscape of Resistance talks about the brave and challenging life of a fighter, Sonia Vujanović, who went through the Second World War as a fighter, but also who escaped the concentration camp. So, you know, that's a story about what happens when somebody's on the other side, you know, closed off because of something they believe in or the national. And so this is, again, as I say, a warning to people who can now testify their lives or were able to testify their lives. The Wire uses a fence to represent an object that separates and that therefore determines lives and destinies of refugees, but also lives of people who are at those spaces where, you know, that us and them is constantly negotiated. And it's actually an interesting philosophical thing to think about, because it's usually very simple to take a position, black and white, you know, these are wrong, these are right, this is right, this is wrong. But actually, you know, this space where and we will talk about this, I'm sure, through the interview, is where it's blended, where it's mixed, where it's not so simple to see who's right and who's wrong.
Another film we will be showing, or two other films we will be showing on the last day, are Alexandra Odic's Frida and Danovic's An Episode in the Life of an Iron Picker. And in my mind, these two films really also sort of connect to Sophia's Last Ambulance, which we showed last year, and which kind of examines how this, you know, social contract between the country's healthcare system and its citizens is sort of disintegrating due to capitalism and neoliberalism. And I believe the films we will be showing this year attack this topic maybe from a different perspective. It's more about the doctor/nurse-patient relationship, up close and personal. So tell us a little bit about these films and how they, for example, also connect to the theme and also to last year's film.
So I really appreciate and love the fact that you said social contract, because that's what we kind of, as citizens who pay taxes, who believe in the systems, should, you know, walk upon, like follow. And the social contract should include that if you fulfill your duties as a citizen, that you will be then able to enjoy the privileges that that certain society then grants you. And then these films, so in the case of the episode in the life of an iron picker, this is shown as something that's been misused and, you know, is misbehaving in those terms. But just to come back, you know, all the films that you referred to, but particularly these two films, talk about the notion of precariousness. So the us and them in these films implies seeing all lives as precarious and thus equally important. So if we return to the body as mechanism that we have that, you know, requires care, these films actually present situations where us and them should not matter. So we as an audience that will be looking at these films are reminded of the fragility of human life and to seek out a connection, to connect with those humans we see on film. So fragile body systems that need help in surviving what we see and what we are. So this level of empathy, it reminds us that, as you said at the beginning, it's not us or them, it's us and them. So Frida showcases, as you said, a connection between a patient and a nurse and the emotions that can happen in this relation when one is in a fragile state, but also a state of love towards care and how that love is then transcended in that relation. And as I said, in regards to the social contract episode in the life of an iron picker, you know, discusses the segregation, the Roma family, particularly in this film, but also in the community, you know, encounters in their need when they need help, medical assistance. So, and that relation that happens in the medical care in the film is actually mirrored onto other spheres of life. So the question of, as we said, us and them is again re-investigated, let's say.
I like that you were now also talking about bodies, because I think bodies really also go through lots of transformations in the films that we will be showing tonight. So we will be showing Samir Karahoda's Parvent, Displaced, then Kukla's Sisters Sestre, and then also Radu Jude's Bad Luck Banging and Loony Porn. And in all of these films, we see actually the protagonists at certain different stages in their lives. Like first we see children who are playing ping pong and training, and then we see teenagers struggling with, adolescence, and they're kind of boxing through it. And then we have adults who, are exploring their intimacy. And when I was kind of thinking about all of these three films, I was also thinking that actually the us and them, or us maybe even or them, can also apply not just to different people, but also actually to ourselves, because we ourselves throughout our lives go through many changes. And there's actually a quote from Richard Ford's novel Canada, where he says, to encounter me at the age of 66 means that you cannot even imagine how I was when I was 15. And especially connected to perhaps Sestre, which deals with teenagers, which is kind of a time when we really go through, let's say, the biggest or one of the biggest transformations in our life. How would you connect this topic to the theme of simply growing up and changing as a person?
I really enjoy this question you posed, because it suggests that the difference is not only transcended between ourselves and those who exist, outside of us, beyond our body, but on the contrary within it, and that is that I always love that complexity of identity, that it's, always negotiated inside, so quote unquote, and outside. So, but the complexity that is asserted to the notion of identity also implies time as crucial in understanding the same. So time is a very big thing that I like to always remind myself and people. So the coming of age, as you suggested, is particularly special because it implies daily fast changed rhythm and pace. So, for teenagers, a day or a month can mean a year. So, and when you're 14 or 15, your body together with your mind changes so rapidly that sometimes it's very difficult to keep pace. So the quote you earlier quoted is actually perfect, because it also gives us this sense of, change happening within us. So it's exactly in those years of adolescence that us and them functions as a differentiator, but also as a collector. So, one wants to belong to a certain group, like, let's say, punks. And it's very loving in the sense of that it belongs to something. But at the same time, punks belong together so strongly because they're not the other groups. So, and that happens in a very, as I said before, fast-paced lifestyle. So it's like a daily negotiations of who one is when belonging to a certain group.
Talking about groups, there's also more and more groups, let's say, online in the virtual world, which kind of brings us to the film that we will show today at the very end, Radu Jude's Bad Luck Banging and Loony Porn. Because in that movie, well, everything sort of kicks off when the female protagonist's very intimate, private video kind of goes viral. And again, it's a very explicit, intimate recording, and then she kind of has to deal with the consequences. And when I was thinking about this film today, I was actually, because currently, I'm not sure if you know, but there's a mini series that just came out, Tommy and Pam, about the leaked, sex tape by Pamela Anderson. And there's been quite a brouhaha around it, because it's kind of like exploiting her again, because it was a very intimate sex tape that was actually stolen from their place, and then it was like put online and everywhere. And actually, from what I understand, she did not consent to this story now being made into a sort of prestige miniseries, although from what I understand, the people who made the series claim that it's very feminist and that it's going to liberate her, which I think is a long discussion. But I mean, here we have a public figure who gets kind of exploited, but it's also becoming more of an issue, I guess, for just normal people, as we have like here with this teacher whose sex tape also goes viral. So there is all of that. But at the same time, in a very different manner, I think people, especially younger people, are more and more pushed into exposing themselves online, sharing everything online, not just being your true self, private self at home, but really kind of having a brand of yourself that you sell, and everything you do, you sort of monetize via social media or whatever. And you are supposed to create parasocial, I don't know, ties to also then get financial gain. So I was thinking in that regard, how do you see that, this us and them? Because nowadays we have so many kind of ties between creators online, and that can actually also have quite nefarious impacts. So how do you see that in that sense?
I was thinking now that when you were talking about this, let's say the Pamela situation and whatnot, I mean, it's a very interesting discourse that's now been happening. Which has been happening for a while, but it's always good to, it's always a theme of sexuality that comes up. That's very interesting because it's intrinsically human, body and sexuality comes one with the other, but the way that, and I was immediately kind of, when you said that the makers of this new series, whatever it is, are saying it's feminist, and whatnot. And I always really sarcastically, I will say, enjoy when people think of what feminist is and what women want or what women need. So it's clearly going to be a topic that's going to be discussed, unfortunately, long after this. But I wanted to just to jump back and say how, the Generation Z is now again renegotiating this idea of pornography being maybe feminist positive or not, kind of coming back to what you were saying. When we see something, how does that influence us? How does that develop our own idea of what use of body or body pleasures really mean? But in terms of this film, which I really appreciate that it has a very delicate and very moment of opening the story plot, the narrative. It's interesting that in the 21st century, we can still see the few minutes of a very open sexual explicit situation as provocative, and absolutely so, because it, as you say, it blends these lines between, let's say, something that's mainstream, like going to the cinema, watching a movie that won, a bear, and something that's inappropriate, taboo, still on the margins, and pornographic material. So it's very interesting to think about these close things. So, but in terms of movie, as I said, it seems today there is no space for making mistakes anymore, experimenting in a way, particularly because intimacy and sexuality are so close and so distant at the same time, coming back to the notion of pornography. So instead of gathering around the premise that it is normal for everybody to have sexual intercourse, the vulnerability of being a part of one, particularly for women, becomes area of shaming and canceling. So that's something, that's, again, of course we can discuss in the terms of feminism and patriarchy and so on and so forth. But your question touches upon a really complex sociological, cultural, and anthropological sphere, where I think today's sense of immersing oneself into the public signifies acceptance and love through a notion ridiculous, such as a like button. But, that is the reality now. So, I mean, I don't have the psychological expertise in the subject, but so I'm maybe not able to discuss the consequences of this so-called immersion and what it carries. However, I still come back to the notion that the most basic need to be loved and secure has been carried over into the digital sphere as a capitalist commodity for exploitation. So, the film does show how the thin line between the personal and the public online actually mirrors our own, I think, identity process within the collective. And it's really, you know, watching this movie, you feel it's interesting. I would love if I could, you know, there is this Google Box, one of the series in UK where people watch things and then we're watching them watching movies or something, different visual content, and hearing what they think. And I would love to be in that position in terms of this movie, because for me, watching it really evoked a sense of anger. For others, it may evoke a sense of, you know, pontification of righteousness and such. So, you know, it's a very complex, but in a good way kind of film.
Well, thank you so much, Marija. This was wonderful. And for you at the Ute Konowitz and online, please immerse yourself into the films that will be shown over the next 3 days. Don't forget that the Balkan Film Week is just an appetizer for our amazing Common Ground like literary offering that will start mid-March. So just a bit on that. So there will be 4 digital events, which you will be able to watch on our YouTube channel. And there will also be lots of like literary events happening actually at the Ute Konowitz with, for example, the infamous Balkan Nacht, which will happen on Saturday evening. And we will have the great Slovene band, the Pantaloons, who will rock the house. And yeah, just stick around for that. I hope we'll see you there. And if you want to know more specifics on that, simply follow us on social media or check out our website, traduki.eu. Or if you like what you're doing, you can also subscribe to our YouTube channel. And this way you definitely know what's going to happen. As I've said, we will do some of these literary events. Unfortunately, Common Ground, the 3-year-long project when we were a region in focus at the Leipzig Book Fair, was now never able to actually happen at the Leipzig Book Fair. But alas, that is how it is. We nevertheless thank the Leipzig Book Fair for being our great partner. And we do hope that we will be there next year. Thank you so much. And for everyone, enjoy the films.